My husband died guarding a secret until I went to the farm he always forbade me to visit. When Richard died, I thought the pain of grief was the only thing I would have to face. But upon opening a forgotten letter and following the trails he left behind, I discovered much more than memories. I found questions, silences, and decisions that would change everything I thought I knew about him, and about myself. At the farm he always told me to avoid, I encountered a web of secrets, family conflicts, and difficult choices. I had to fight to protect what little I had left, rediscover my strength, and most importantly, decide what kind of legacy I wanted to leave for my daughter. This is not just a story about loss. It's about new beginnings, quiet courage, and the search for a truth that had been buried for years. I'm so glad you're here. Follow my story to the end and comment from which city you are following me. I want to know how far this story will go. Rummaging through old books in the attic, I found something that shouldn't have been there. Among pages marked by time, there was a letter in Richard's handwriting, a rusty key, and a small metal strongbox. My heart raced. His absence echoed in every corner of the house, but that discovery reopened wounds and stirred questions. I felt the weight of grief mixed with a suspense that made me tremble. The letter was sealed with red wax, as if from another century. I opened it with trembling hands and read every word as if he were still by my side. If you found this, it's because the time has come, it said. Richard never spoke in riddles, but there he was, guiding me again even after death. I looked at the strongbox. That key wasn't just symbolic. I put the key in the lock and heard the click that broke the silence in the room. My eyes burned not just from longing, but from an unknown fear that was creeping in. I knew Richard well, and if he had left something hidden, it was because he didn't trust anyone else. I leaned in, took a deep breath, and opened the strongbox. Inside, I would find more than memories. It wasn't just a farewell. It was a beginning. Inside the strongbox, 3 items rested on a dark cloth. An external hard drive, a map of the property with enigmatic markings, and a list of names I didn't recognize. I carefully picked up the hard drive, noticing it was password protected. Richard was always meticulous, but why hide all this? The map looked old with areas circled in red. The list, with quick annotations, seemed to be a mix of allies and suspects. Some names were crossed out and others had question marks. Some sounded familiar, perhaps mentioned in casual conversations during family dinners. But why did he never tell me? Why so much secrecy about this property in Stonefield, which he always avoided mentioning? It felt like I was opening Pandora's box, and yet I couldn't stop. I held the map firmly and approached the window. The late afternoon light highlighted the marks on the paper, as if screaming for attention. Something was buried there, and not just in the literal sense. The name Greaves appeared in the lower corner, suggesting that Richard's trusted lawyer knew more than he let on. I took a deep breath. This was just the beginning. What if this is bigger than I can imagine? The next morning, I received a formal call from Mr. Greaves. He had scheduled the will reading for the following day and seemed anxious, almost nervous. When he arrived at my house, he carried a voluminous folder and eyes that avoided mine. We talked in Richard's office, surrounded by books and memories. I no longer trusted silences, not even my own. Greaves revealed that there was a secret annex to the will, something that would only be mentioned in my presence. Your husband planned everything with surgical precision, he said. Every word he spoke made me more uneasy. What did he mean, a plan? What kind of plan requires maps, lists, strongboxes, and encryption? I felt my chest tighten. Richard not only foresaw the worst, he engineered answers. I stood up and paced, trying to organize my thoughts. Greaves watched every move, as if expecting my reaction. You need to be prepared, he murmured. This wasn't just legal bureaucracy. It was an inheritance with hidden layers, and I was at the center of a carefully woven web. Would I be ready for whatever came next? He left you more than an inheritance, Evelyn. He left you a plan. Arriving in Stonefield was like stepping into a portrait framed by uncertainties. Lily and I crossed the iron gate under a cloudy sky, and the sight of the partially restored house brought back memories I didn't even know I had. The imposing facade tried to hide the years of abandonment, but something in the air felt out of place. It wasn't just dust or silence. It was a presence. As we walked along the porch, I noticed recent footprints in the damp earth. The door latch was forced, and some rooms showed signs of recent activity. Lily held my hand, apprehensive, as if the heavy atmosphere conveyed what words dared not. Everything there whispered of surveillance. Someone had been there, and not long ago. I looked around and felt a chill down my spine. That house should have been closed since Richard's death. Who would have access? And why? My questions multiplied with each room I inspected. Lily suggested it might have been her uncle's. I feared it was more than that. We were facing something we couldn't yet name. Someone has been here recently. It wasn't long before the storm knocked on the door, literally. 3 black cars parked at the entrance, and with them came Charles, Benjamin, and Thomas, accompanied by an officer with documents in hand. Charles's gaze was one of anticipated victory, and Benjamin displayed his typical expression of false cordiality. My body froze. Lily cowered behind me. They presented a supposed court order demanding immediate access to the property, claiming legal interest in the inheritance. The officer, visibly uncomfortable, was merely doing his duty. My instinct was to retreat, but my mind screamed for resistance. They knew what they were after. And it wasn't just the house. It was something hidden within it. I looked into Charles's eyes and realized his visit wasn't by chance. They were prepared, articulate, and, above all, impatient. But why now? The will hadn't even been read yet. Something was rushing them. Something that might be connected to the strongbox, to the hard drive, or to what Richard truly left behind. I needed to find out before them. They didn't just come out of curiosity. Mr. Greaves arrived in time to confront the supposed order. He took the documents, read them carefully, and pointed out several inconsistencies. Benjamin tried to argue, but his voice faltered before the lawyer's firmness. Time was requested for analysis. Meanwhile, tension spread through the rooms like old mold. Lily and I were in the eye of a dispute that hadn't even officially begun. When the brothers momentarily retreated, I decided I wouldn't leave that property anytime soon. Something told me that what was hidden in Stonefield was more valuable than any paper inheritance. It was time to investigate, to use every clue Richard had left. Fear was still within me, but now there was also a spark of determination. I went back to the office and reviewed the old map. The circled areas seemed to coincide with structures I didn't yet know. What if the secret annex was more than a legal metaphor? What if it was really somewhere on the property waiting to be found? I couldn't hesitate any longer. The truth needed me. You have more rights than you think, Evelyn. But also more enemies. The morning was gray when Helen arrived. She carried a simple backpack, but her eyes showed she knew more than she let on. She hugged me tightly without words, as if she understood that Richard united us even after death. We connected the hard drive to the old computer in the office, and a black screen appeared with a single file named, "For Evelyn." I clicked with my heart in my throat. The video began with Richard sitting in the same office where we were, visibly distraught, but with a determined look. "If you're watching this, it's because they've already arrived," he said. Tears came before I could stop them. Helen squeezed my hand. Richard seemed to foresee every step, every enemy, every doubt that now consumed me. I wasn't alone. Gradually, the video became more technical. It showed documents, dates, and spoke of marked zones on the map. He explained that certain files could not be together for security. That's why he hid some in specific compartments on the property. Helen seemed to know what everything was. I looked at her surprised. Richard trusted her. Before me. Before everyone. If you're seeing this, it's because they've already arrived. In the second video, Richard appeared more tired. He said that his brothers planned to take everything, and that he suspected forgery of documents, illegal plans, and blackmail. They think they can manipulate the law, but the truth is safe. My body froze. He already knew he would be betrayed. And yet, he chose to fight in silence. For us. For me. He revealed that he had hidden legal documents in a place beyond the reach of greed, using codes that only Helen would understand. Trust only her. She knows where to look, he said, looking directly at the camera. I trembled. Helen confirmed with a nod. She knew the clues. She wasn't an ally by chance. Richard prepared her. And now it was my turn. The videos continued, each one more intense. There were images of the terrain, specific instructions for alternative paths within the property. Richard spoke of a buried truth, something that could not fall into the wrong hands. I felt that I was no longer just a widow. I was the guardian of a legacy, and he was waiting for me to reveal it. Trust only Helen. She knows where to look. With the video still echoing in my mind, I returned to the map from the strongbox. An area near the forest was marked with a red circle and the letter S. Helen immediately said, "Statue." We followed the indicated path and, among tall trees and dry leaves, found a stone figure covered in moss. It was a woman with a torch, the image of the goddess Hestia. As we observed closely, I noticed a mark at the base of the sculpture, as if it were a worn inscription. Helen carefully cleaned it and revealed a symbol identical to what appeared on Richard's papers. It was no coincidence. That was a landmark. And the statue's position seemed to point east, toward the old greenhouse. We were getting closer. The wind began to blow strongly, and for a moment everything seemed suspended in time. I touched the stone and felt a strange vibration, as if something was beneath it. Helen wrote down the coordinates and smiled with a rare sparkle in her eyes. "We're on the right track," she said. But I knew that Stonefield's secret was not on the surface. The secret of Stonefield is not in what is seen, but in what was erased. We headed to the greenhouse, guided by the map's clues and the silent intuition that grew between Helen and me. The glass was broken, the interior overgrown with ivy, but something there didn't seem organic. In the left corner under a wooden workbench we noticed a crack in the floor. Helen knelt and removed a loose board. A trapdoor was hidden there. My heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear my thoughts. We opened it with effort, revealing a rusty ladder that descended into darkness. Helen's flashlight illuminated concrete walls and signs of ancient dampness. We went down. Below, the air was dense but the space was intact. Shelves with files, locked drawers, maps tacked to the walls. A bunker. A secret refuge. There was a table with the name Project Stonefield engraved in metal. Geological maps, property blueprints, contracts. Richard had been there many times, and he never said a word. Helen walked among the papers with the familiarity of someone who had dreamed of that place. I watched everything in silence, caught between astonishment and pain. My husband had lived a parallel life. He had known about this for years, and no one suspected. We spent hours sifting through every document. We found contracts signed with a company called Green Core, specializing in clean energy. There were detailed clauses, all in Richard's name, and an important addition: the explicit exclusion of Charles, Benjamin, and Thomas from any future rights. He planned every detail, and Stonefield was the center of the plan. Helen smiled as she analyzed one of the papers. If this is validated, the property is self-sufficient, and they lose everything. I could hardly believe it. Richard didn't just want to protect the place. He wanted it to serve a greater good. The energy beneath our feet could power the entire town, and he wanted it to be used consciously. Every line I read made me less of a victim and more of an heir. Not just of assets but of a mission. We were facing something that would change everything. And the brothers had no idea what had been left behind. Least not yet. Time was precious. We needed to act before anyone suspected. If this is validated, they lose everything. I returned home with boxes of documents and a burning purpose in my chest. During the night, I began to assemble a timeline. Dates, contracts, movements. Each piece fit into a puzzle left by Richard. The pain of grief gave way to an unexpected lucidity. Now everything made sense. Or almost everything. The next morning, as I went for a walk to clear my mind, I noticed a figure standing near the fence. Thomas. He was observing from afar, like someone studying before attacking. I pretended not to notice and went back inside. My instinct told me not to confront him. Not yet. I needed to strengthen myself first. The evidence was in my hands, but their eyes were on me. I closed the curtains and locked every door. Helen was checking the files and Lily was still asleep. The bunker needed to remain secret, at least for now. It wasn't time to show our cards yet. But the silent war had begun, and I would no longer be a passive pawn in their game. Now I commanded the chessboard. The silent war had just begun. I found Lily sitting in the garden, distant, her gaze lost among the trees. Something had changed. When I approached, I noticed her quickly hiding her phone. "I talked to Uncle Charles," she said, as if dropping a bomb into the silence. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm, but my whole body screamed in alarm. I knew what he was capable of, and she still didn't. Lily told me that Charles spoke about Richard's past, saying he abandoned the family, that he was never trustworthy, that he manipulated everyone. It was painful to see her absorb lies as truths. I tried to explain, to show her that it was just part of the uncle's strategy to confuse and divide. But she was hurt, and when one is hurt, any story seems plausible. I tried to remind her of who her father truly was, how much he protected us. But she was immersed in guilt, fear, and anger. "They always said my father was a coward," she murmured, her eyes full of tears. That broke something inside me. I needed to prove that it wasn't true, and I needed to do it now. "They always said my father was a coward." I rummaged through the files in the bunker until I found a folder named Lily inside a USB drive. I took it to the computer with trembling hands, feeling that this would be the turning point. The video began with Richard smiling, emotional. "Daughter, if you're watching this, it's because you doubted me." "But I never doubted you," he said. Lily appeared behind me, listening to every word in silence. He told stories of her childhood, small memories but full of love. Then he explained that he hid everything to protect her, that his brothers were dangerous, and that the truth could only come out when she was ready. "Trust your mother, Lily. She faced everything for us," he said with a choked voice. And there, on that screen, he reconnected her to what truly mattered. Lily fell to her knees at the end of the video. I approached and hugged her. I felt her body finally relax. "Forgive me, Mom," she whispered. I could only cry. That was the daughter I knew. That was the strength Richard always saw in her. And now together we could face whatever came. Never doubt someone who faced the world for you. The next day we looked for Charles. He was in the house's library, as if already expecting us. When we entered, he stood up with his usual expression of control, but Lily was direct. "You lied to me. You used my pain." He tried to disguise it, saying he just wanted to help her understand. But his mask was starting to crack. And I saw it. We showed him the video. Charles lost his color. He tried to claim it was a fabrication, desperation, manipulation. But Lily was firm. "You won't confuse my mind anymore." For the first time I felt we were on equal footing. He couldn't handle it. His words became jumbled. The game had changed, and we were no longer vulnerable. As he stammered, Lily looked at me with a firmness she had never shown. "We're going to fight, Mom." And I knew she was ready. Richard prepared this moment with every letter, every choice. Now it was our mission to carry it forward. And we would not back down, not anymore. Not in the face of lies. Not in the face of threats. We will not retreat. Not one step. With the support of Mr. Greaves and Helen's knowledge, I organized an extraordinary meeting with city representatives, local council members, and Ethan Wells, CEO of Green Corps. I wanted everything to be public, transparent. No more secrets. But the brothers, of course, tried to stop it. They filed petitions for annulment and spread rumors. On the day of the meeting, the pressure was palpable. Charles showed up at the last minute, trying to convince those present that it was an emotional ploy. Benjamin questioned legalities. Thomas merely observed. But I stood firm. Their narrative would not hold up against the evidence Richard left. Now it was time to turn the tables. I said I wasn't seeking conflict but justice. That there were legitimate documents, maps, contracts. And that the city also had much to gain from it. Some seemed convinced, others still hesitated. But it was just the beginning. The truth needed space to breathe. And I was going to make sure it had it. They are trying to control the narrative. Helen, with the precision of someone who loves what she does, presented the geological data of the property. She showed that Stonefield was located over an underground energy field capable of supplying hundreds of homes. Ethan analyzed the contracts signed by Richard and confirmed their validity. He knew the value of this and wanted to do the right thing, he said firmly. The room fell silent. The impact of that sentence was profound. Richard didn't want profit. He wanted purpose. He wanted a future. Ethan explained how Green Corps could transform Stonefield into a sustainable hub, with community participation. This wasn't just about energy. It was about legacy responsibility, about what we want to leave to the world. I looked at every face present. Some were emotional, others scared by the weight of the revelation. But most importantly, they were listening. Richard's vision was being heard and felt. And at that moment I knew that the heart of the farm was starting to beat again. And this time not through silence but through truth. Stonefield can be the future of clean energy. The brothers, cornered, went on the offensive. Charles threatened to sue the city, Ethan, and me. Benjamin spoke of trespassing, breach of confidentiality. Thomas again said little. But I faced them with the serenity of someone who no longer fears the storm. Do what you want. I will not be silenced anymore, I replied. I stood up and asked to speak. I said that if there were so many doubts we could take everything to a public hearing. That the documents would speak for themselves. That the community deserved to hear the truth with their own eyes. Greaves supported my proposal. Ethan did too. And at that moment I realized that their power came from fear. But I was no longer afraid. Lily squeezed my hand. Helen smiled in approval. The city representatives nodded. The next step would be decisive, but we were ready. Not just for ourselves but for all who had been silenced. For all who needed to hide to protect what is just. We will show who the true Carters are. The community hall was packed. The wooden benches barely held the residents who came to witness what had become the most talked about event in Stonefield. My heart was pounding, but something was different about me. It was no longer fear that guided me, it was certainty. I stepped onto the pulpit with documents in hand, videos prepared, maps folded. I started by telling the story from the beginning, without mincing words. I showed Richard's recording, the evidence from the bunker, the contracts with Green Corps. Every image, every signature drew murmurs from the audience. When Charles stood up to interrupt me, trying to ridicule my speech, I simply pointed to the documents. It's all here. Signed by Richard. He tried to laugh to scorn. But the weight of the evidence spoke louder than any irony. Some council members were already taking notes. Others looked at me with respect. For the first time I wasn't just the silent widow, I was a voice. And there, before the entire town, Stonefield began to show its true story. It's all here, signed by Richard. Mr. Greaves asked to speak. With his usual calm, he presented the documentation for the property transfer. He showed dates, registry office records, and signatures that confirmed everything. Richard had legally transferred the farm to my name long before his death. The papers were undeniable. Benjamin's silence was broken by his own fury. He stood up, protesting, calling everything a fraud, claiming emotional manipulation. But his voice no longer echoed as it once did. The evidence was there, and the town saw it. Charles rubbed his temples, Thomas hid in his own thoughts. It was the end of the control they had. The mask had fallen. The truth finally was free. The justice of the peace confirmed the validity of everything presented. Greaves smiled discreetly. Lily cried in silence. I could only breathe deeply, as if years of oppression were leaving me in a single exhalation. It was official. I not only won the case, I won back myself. They no longer have any rights. The community rose to applaud. Those who had hesitated before now united in a gesture of support. I received hugs, nods, words of strength. Even old allies of the Carters approached to apologize. Inspector Doyle, present at the hearing, came up to me and said, "You did the impossible. And you did it alone." He assured me that, from that moment on, there would be legal and police protection for me, Lily, and any activity in Stonefield. The city would no longer allow greed to silence justice. I thanked him, feeling a different warmth in my chest. It wasn't anger. It was purpose. It was peace. And above all, it was a new beginning. I looked up at the sky as I left the hall. For the first time it seemed clean, promising. Richard would be proud. Helen smiled beside me. Lily squeezed my hand. And we all knew. The worst was over, but the real work was just beginning. Stonefield doesn't belong to the past. It belongs to the future she is building. The brothers left town in silence. Charles was the first, with dark eyes. Benjamin left the next day, taking with him his threats and resentments. But Thomas stayed. He sought me out 2 days later on the porch of the house with a different demeanor. "Can I talk to you?" he asked with an almost sincere tone. I sat in silence and listened. He spoke of old doubts, regrets, and never feeling part of that power game. He said he stayed because he wanted to try to do things differently. But his words, though soft, came from someone who observed too much and acted too little. My heart was divided between caution and compassion, but I remained silent, evaluating every gesture. Maybe I'm not like them, he said, almost in a whisper. I didn't answer immediately. Part of me wanted to believe, but another stronger part knew that trusting now would be a risk we couldn't take. The wounds were still open, and the future demanded vigilance. I needed to be fair, but I also needed to be firm. Maybe I'm not like them. Lily, upon hearing about the conversation with her uncle, reacted with suspicion. He stayed because he's waiting for an opening, she said. And deep down I felt that too. Thomas's approach could be genuine, or a last-ditch effort. The problem was that there was no more room for gambles. Pain had taught us to be discerning and stronger. I decided we would keep our distance. Time would tell who he really was. For now, every step needed to be carefully considered. There was no more room for sentimentality. Everything we had built so far was at stake. And I wouldn't let the past invade this new space of healing and transformation. Lily understood. Helen agreed. And I felt for the first time in a long time that I had a team. A small group of true loyalty. Stonefield deserved to be rebuilt by clean hands. And that's what we were doing. With every choice, every silence, every boundary. Now it's not time for second chances. The following weeks were dedicated to planning with Ethan. The project to transform Stonefield into a clean energy hub began to take shape. Meetings with engineers, presentations to the city, technical visits. Every corner of the property seemed to breathe new meaning. Richard couldn't have imagined that everything would move so fast. Or perhaps he had dreamed it exactly this way. The contractual clauses ensured that the community would have direct participation in the profits and the use of energy. More than a power plant, we wanted to create a model of balance. The energy would be renewable, but so would the hope of the people who supported us. It was more than justice. It was renewal. It was vision. I walked through the fields at the end of each day, observing the workers and the dawn of a new phase. What Richard had planted in secret now bloomed for all to see. And what was once pain now was purpose. I didn't want revenge. I wanted transformation. And that's exactly what we were doing. The legacy was not wealth. It was vision. I went up to Richard's old room on a quiet late afternoon. The door, which I had avoided opening for so long, seemed to invite me in this time. Inside, the smell of paint and wood still lingered in the air. On the easel rested an unfinished painting, soft colors forming the outlines of a landscape. In the bottom corner, a handwritten phrase. For when you have the courage to dream again. I touched the canvas delicately. It was as if he was still there, waiting for me to complete what we started together. Memories no longer hurt me as they once did. Now they brought warmth. Richard left pieces of himself throughout the house, not for me to be trapped, but for me to find my way back to myself. I sat in the armchair and cried in silence, not from pain but from gratitude. The painting was more than a memory. It was an invitation. The past that once paralyzed me now propelled me forward. I took a deep breath and smiled for the first time in there. I looked at the canvas and knew without a doubt I would finish that work. Not as an ending, but as a new chapter, a new color. I am no longer afraid. During dinner, Lily brought up an idea that left me speechless. She wanted to transform part of the house into an educational center about clean energy. The children here need to know that the future is in their hands, she said, her eyes shining. That was my daughter. Transformed, aware, firm. Richard would have been proud. I immediately envisioned rooms with maps, experiments, solar panels explained by enthusiastic young people. It was much more than I had imagined for that place. It was continuity. It was roots and wings. She wanted to plant knowledge while the world harvested hope. Lily not only overcame, she blossomed. And she took me with her in that blossoming. I hugged her tightly and promised to support every detail. It was our dream now. The educational center would bear Richard's name, but the soul of all of us. Pain gave way to action, and Stonefield once again gained new meaning. Now not to hide secrets, but to teach truths. This place will teach what it means to resist. In the following days, I dedicated myself to Richard's unfinished painting. I brought the easel to the new center and positioned it in front of the window, where the light fell most gently. I began to fill in the strokes he had left, with careful brushstrokes. I didn't want to redo his work, but to continue it with my own soul. Gradually the image took shape. Green fields, clear sky, and in the background the facade of Stonefield with open doors. A representation of what it had become. I painted as one writes a letter to the future. And when I finished, I knew that this was the most important painting of my life. I called Lily, Helen, and Greaves to see it. No one said a word, they just looked emotional. I hung the work in the entrance hall of the center. It was the first thing everyone would see upon arriving. A symbol of everything we had overcome. And of what was yet to come. It's not just a place. It's a new beginning. It was a spring morning when Mr. Greaves appeared with an envelope in hand. He was more serious than usual. Richard asked me to deliver this only when everything was peaceful, he said. The paper was yellowed from being stored for weeks, but still firm as if resisting time. It was the last letter. The last part of a plan of love. I opened it carefully. The first lines made me gasp. Evelyn, if you are reading this, it is because you did exactly what I knew you would do. I read each paragraph feeling his presence beside me. He spoke about choices, about quiet courage, about what it means to leave a legacy. And it ended with a phrase that pierced my soul. Among everything I built, you were my greatest decision. That resonated within me like a sweet echo. I closed my eyes, held the letter to my chest. It no longer mattered what had been taken from us. What mattered was what we managed to keep alive, despite everything. You were my greatest decision. I invited Lily to read the letter with me. We sat in the garden where it all began. She held my hand, and as she read, silent tears fell. When she finished, we hugged without saying anything. There was so much in every word of Richard's. He didn't just want to protect a property. He wanted to free the people he loved from the legacy of fear that the family carried. We stayed there for hours watching the sky change color. For the first time, I understood his plan in its entirety. It wasn't just strategy. It was emotional vision. It was love in the form of a map, a video, a letter. And now that everything was complete, we could breathe without weight. With longing, yes. But with lightness. Lily whispered. He believed in us more than we believed in ourselves. And I knew it was true. Every step we took was guided by that hidden but constant love. And now it was our turn to reciprocate. Not with revenge, but with legacy. With future. With freedom. It wasn't about the land. It was about freedom. I planted an olive tree next to the educational center, in a small circular garden. Beside it, a wooden plaque with carved letters. Here begins the new cycle. It was more than a tribute. It was an anchor in time. Something that would remain after us, growing in silence, teaching with its roots. I asked everyone to place their hand on the tree, as a sign of unity. Helen, Lily, Greaves, even some town residents who had accompanied us. It wasn't a grand event. It was intimate, profound, like everything that truly matters. A seed in the present looking to the future. As I stepped back, I looked at Stonefield in the distance. I no longer saw ghosts. I saw open windows, firm footsteps, resolute voices. It was a living place, a healed space, a period that chose to become a comma. And deep in my heart I knew everything made sense. Every pain, every choice, every silence. Stonefield was not an end. It was a starting point. It's been exactly 1 year since the hearing that changed everything. Stonefield, once a buried secret, is now a hub of innovation and education in clean energy. I walk through the center's corridors with curious children, engaged teachers, and panels that explain, in an accessible way, what was once hidden. I give lectures on history, on courage, and on how the past can fuel the future. I have become something I never imagined. A guardian of tomorrow. I see in the children's eyes the spark of discovery. They touch the panels, ask questions, and dream big. Richard would be delighted with every gesture. The maps, the videos, the contracts, everything has become shared knowledge. And more than that, inspiration. After all, they don't just learn about energy. They learn about resilience, choice, and legacy. Today, each room is named after someone who was part of this journey. And when I look at the walls with phrases from Richard and Lily, I feel that everything was planted with intention. Every now and then I stop and observe in silence. I know that we didn't just change a farm. We changed the destiny of an entire community. And that, yes, is a revolution. Every child here carries a seed of the future. Lily launched her book on an autumn morning, before an emotional audience. Carter, The Story of a Family and a Legacy, is already in school libraries and universities. She wrote with honesty without hiding the wounds, but revealing the cures. She brought to light the contradictions of our history, and the power to rewrite it with courage. The book became more than a family narrative. It became a manifesto on how silent love can overcome the noise of greed. At the end of the public reading, Lily looked at me and said, "You taught me not to lower my eyes." I felt that even without Richard here. His presence pulsed in every word she spoke. People cried, applauded, shared their own stories. The pain that once isolated us now connected us. It was there that I understood. Transforming suffering into knowledge was our true victory. Stonefield was not about land, power, or dispute. It was about transcendence. About showing that there is light after darkness. Transforming pain into learning was the greatest legacy. I returned to the bunker that afternoon, now completely renovated. We transformed the old refuge of secrets into a research room with illuminated shelves, padded benches, and interactive screens. But part of it was kept as it was. A corner with the strongbox, the statue, and the first maps. Not to remember the pain, but to honor the journey. I sat in the wooden chair where Richard must have spent so many hours. I looked at the ceiling, took a deep breath, and closed my eyes. For the first time, the silence did not weigh on me. It was the silence of peace, not of fear. I felt that he was there, not as an absence but as a full presence. I opened my eyes and contemplated the transformation around me. Everything had changed, including me. I was no longer the woman who feared conflicts, who hesitated before decisions. Now I was someone who had lived, fallen, risen, and built. With memory, with purpose, and above all with love. Finally, everything made sense. Now, I'm curious about you who heard my story. What would you do if you were in my shoes? Have you experienced anything similar? Support the channel by subscribing, liking, commenting, and sharing this video. I'm leaving another story on the final screen that you'll also enjoy, and it will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.